Welcome to another CastCast video, you guys. This will be my week 4 prediction video for all of Sunday's games. And with that, let us get to the games themselves. First up, we obviously have the Denver Broncos visiting the New York Jets in New York. Obviously, an AFC showdown here, with the Jets coming off an impressive win over the Patriots, and then the Broncos maybe an even more impressive win over Tampa Bay. Obviously, the Patriots, as we know, we kind of don't know what their identity is. Gerard Mayo, new head coach, but they were feisty in their first two games of the season and really only looking, like a team that couldn't really do anything against the Jets last week. But the Jets, I will say this, I felt that Aaron Rodgers was still throwing the ball really well. He's obviously understanding the offense really, really well, who he has in getting them the ball. And their run game wasn't terrible against a stout New England defense. The Broncos probably coming off a more impressive win, considering that many consider the Broncos to be a bottom dweller among teams, and also beating a team that beat the Lions in the previous week in a nail biter. So, with that being said, obviously going into this week, I think the Jets are going to pose a big problem for Denver. I think that Denver, while they have, a better defense than offense, I don't think they have all that is necessary to be able to stop Breece Hall, Rodgers, Garrett Wilson, Alan Lazard, and all the other weapons that the Jets have. And I guess, Conklin. Conklin really impressed. I don't think anybody realized that, oh, hey, Aaron Rodgers' favorite target isn't going to be Garrett Wilson last game, but it's going to be Tyler Conklin, which, he's always been kind of not a flashy guy, but a good understanding of the game to me. And I think that connection with Rodgers has just added a dynamic that he's missed for a long time. Not having the most stable of tight ends, on the Packers, and now having someone like Conklin who it seems like he can rely on to be a security blanket or even just a top threat, amongst other, receiving threats on their team. Obviously, we don't really need to talk too much about the Jets defense. Last week, they didn't have CJ Mosley. This week, it looks like they are without him as well. The thing that I'll say is that people thought that New England was going to run on the Jets because the Jets' run D has been subpar. But last week, they really put that, kind of to rest on a team that, yeah, their primary thing that they were doing was running the football. Now, Denver hasn't really been running it either. They have an abysmal run game, and looking at this game, the the Jets, or as of right now, have like a 7.5 point spread, or advantage over the Broncos, and I think that that's pretty accurate. I think that they're gonna win soundly, and it's never gonna really be in doubt. As I don't think that Bo Nix, well, he's not gonna be risky with the football. I think that the Jets just have too good of a secondary. So with that being said, I'm giving this game to the Jets and predicting that they will be 3-1 after week 4 is over, and obviously the second home game of the season. And the Broncos will fall to 1-3. And I'm predicting the final score to be 31-13, I think is going to be the final score in favor of the Jets. Moving on, we got my beloved Packers hosting the Minnesota Vikings in an NFC North showdown. Obviously, the first divisional game for the Packers, as well as the Vikings, I'm pretty sure. Let me look at this real quick. That is right. And the Vikings, you know, I didn't think it was too far of a stretch to say that this team could get better. A lot of people seem to think that they didn't. They obviously lost Danielle Hunter in free agency, which isn't that much of a shock to me as he is getting a little bit older, and he essentially had kind of a splash game, season with them. Not to say he wasn't good, but the way that he played last season was a lot better than he usually plays. But this year, I mean, they bring in Dallas Turner. They also draft a guy who isn't even starting, but they do address their pass rush capabilities, which you definitely need in the North when supposedly almost every QB should be, a perennial QB. I'm not going to say any names on that, but, and you also signed Sam Darnold, who I thought it was a sneaky, brilliant signing. Not to say that I think that O'Connell has definitely helped him and the system has definitely helped him. And obviously, having a guy like Jefferson is going to make you look better, but Darnold has been very, very proficient this year. Even with shaky O-line play, which is surprising to me because I do think that they have two of the one of the best tackle duos in the league. Darnold has impressed. 8 TDs and 2 picks through 3 games. I think anybody would take that stat line, and 657 yards. So it's not like he's having the effect that they have a solid run game. Don't get me wrong, Aaron Jones is having a good year with 228 yards. I just hope that they don't overwork him and he gets hurt because honestly, he is still one of my favorite players and such a fun player to watch. Although I won't be rooting for him Sunday, obviously, for his return to Lambeau Field. That's also another thing, too. I think emotions are going to be high. I think with the fact that you've got Aaron Jones, who obviously said some things this week, like, oh, there won't be a G on my helmet on Sunday, but there's always one in my heart. I think it's touching, but I also think that, just about everybody on the Packers, besides the rookies they drafted this year, knows Aaron Jones. Even the new guys may have known him a little bit, just, because he wasn't immediately off the team with the end of the year. He was still on the team after the draft happened. And who knows, a guy like Aaron Jones, always friendly, always professional, always, leaves it all out on the field, essentially to me. And it's always, a reason why he's always been such a special player to me. Plays, as far as I'm concerned, he plays like half a foot taller than his size. And it's going to be a tough, weekend of stopping him and Justin Jefferson for the Packers, I think. Ironically enough, last year the Vikings came into Lambeau and they, took apart my Packers at home, and then kind of vice versa. My Packers went to the bank later in the season, and as we all know, Kirk Cousins was having the best football year of his career, honestly, last year before his Achilles popped, and my Packers happened to win that game. And Justin Jefferson was kind of a non-factor. Like Jair really locked him up, a lot of trash talking, even grittied on him type of thing. This is one of those games to me that it's like, who's ready to prove that they're ready to take the North? And I think that like with the Packers, potentially Jordan Love returning for obviously his first home game of the season, which I do think he plays. I think they were really saving him for this game to make sure that he's ready. I don't think that the injury was as bad as they could have said. I think if it was, I don't think he would be limited in practice for the last 2 weeks, essentially, to where it's then, oh, he's questionable and they don't allow him to suit up. Obviously, one other thing too is the Packers coming off a fuming win against the Titans, who also had protection problems, and defensive coordinator Jeff Hafley dialing up the exotic blitzes, but also some guys just flat out beating, their guys on the line, which I fear for Darnold's proficiency in passing, if that's the case. And obviously the Vikings, they haven't turned the ball over a lot. The Packers have the top turnover defense at this point in the year. And I think that they are really ready to show that we're going to handle things and we're ready to take this division by the horns, because essentially the Vikings are obviously the only undefeated team in the North, and you've got the Packers and Packers and Lions both at 2-1. So this is a very early pivotal game to where seeding could it won't be decided here, but seeding is going to be a lot easier if you've got this game advantage going into the later part of the season. And obviously you got to defend at home. With that being said, I think the Packers win this game. I think the Vikings defense, while it has been pretty good and Flores has done a great job with it, they haven't really been the best team against the run this year. And with that being said, the Packers defense has done really well. I think that last week the Vikings did have somewhat of a statement win over Houston, but I also think that Houston is off to a rocky start this year. I mean, they had a game where they just couldn't really close it out against the Bears in terms of like, oh, this gives me confidence that this team is going to be really hard to beat, because they left the Bears in it for however long. I will say this as well, that I think the Vikings beating San Fran has, a little bit of, maybe it looks a little bit more impressive when it was played 2 weeks ago, but with San Fran kind of struggling even against a beat up team last week, I think that overall you look at the Vikings, and I do think that they're really gunning, because the later part of the season they have a lot more difficult of opponents. In my opinion, opponents that obviously at this point aren't as banged up. And I'm not saying that they're not, they don't have a chance to be good this year. But I think that their early success, comes based off of teams not performing as well as they could at this point in the year, because it's still early and teams seem to be kind of in limbo, to be honest with you, besides a few teams. So I'm taking my Packers, and I do think that this will be a close game, but I'm taking my Packers, and I'm predicting the score to be 28-23, and them rising to 3-1, and the leaders in the North after this game, or at least above the Vikings, knocking them from their undefeated spot. Moving on to the next game, we have Saints versus Falcons. Obviously an NFC South showdown. I think that this game is also kind of a similar vibe, except for the fact that the Falcons, they lost last week when they definitely could have closed the game out on the Chiefs. I would have a bit more confidence in them. if, they were able to actually close it. And I mean, people can say penalties, people can say whatever, but it's like they definitely had a good shot to win that game. I mean, you can't say that it's like, oh, it's like they didn't get a crack at it at all, that game. But, you got the Saints, who obviously they were the number one scoring offense. They may still be. I'm not sure after last week. They only put up 12, obviously. after putting up 47 and 44 the first 2 weeks. And looking at the Saints, I think that they think that this is their division to take. Obviously, Philadelphia is a talented team, even though they were beat up last week. They played them really tough. They really, to me, lost the game off of 2 plays. 2 plays, the Saquon touchdown and the Goddard touchdown. And I just don't think that defense, I think they're going to be really mad at themselves for letting that game go, to be honest with you. The Saints, in my opinion, should be 3-0. And you look at the Falcons. They were supposed to be a really good team. Oh, we finally have a quarterback. And while I will say Kirk looked infinitely better against Kansas City in terms of accuracy and that sort of thing last week, than against Philadelphia, who they happened to win against, I think that the Falcons just haven't lived up to expectations. And I think that, the Saints just have an opportunistic defense. I do expect their offense to pick back up again. And with that, I'm taking the Saints. I think that they're ready to kind of go and show and put themselves up like 3 games against the Falcons, essentially, with this one. And the oddball thing about it is, too, is that the Falcons haven't played well at home. The 2 losses that they had, essentially lost by 8 points against Pittsburgh and then losing by 5 to Kansas City. They just haven't really looked that good at home for whatever reason. But I'm going to take the Saints, and I do think that they somewhat return to the way that they were playing, to where it's like they're running the ball really, really well. And they're scheming their wide receivers open again, off of the running that they do. So I'm taking the Saints, and I'm going to say that they're going to score 31, and I think the Falcons are going to struggle, and they are going to score 20. Couple touchdowns and a couple field goals is what I predict for them. But moving on, the next game we have is Eagles-Buccaneers. An interesting game. Obviously, these 2 teams coming off of the Eagles off a win and Tampa Bay off of a loss. Tampa Bay probably wondering what happened to our it's to our offense. And I think that the main issue with them is that they don't have much of a run game. So it always catches up with you. And I mean, you obviously have the Eagles who kind of went up against, a buzzsaw of a defense that only happened to really do well off of 2 plays. So obviously the Eagles, they lost to Tampa Bay last postseason, when they were entering the postseason, and they looked like the worst, playoff team, to be honest with you, with how much they were skidding last year. This game, we look at it and we see that, Devonta Smith is out. You do have A.J. Brown, however, is questionable. I'm assuming he will play. Otherwise, I think it's going to have to be the Saquon show again. Who, ironically enough, had 3 TDs week 1 and then didn't have a 4th until last week when he had that big run against the Saints. Devonta Smith being out kind of sucks. They really aren't that deep at wide receiver, in my opinion, on the Eagles. Besides Brown and Smith, and with one of them out, I mean, that's going to really make it hard on Jalen Hurts. Tampa Bay, I think, is going to be able to put up a fight, but I do think they lose just because they can't really run the ball. And I think that the strength of this Philadelphia line is that they rush the passer better than they defend the run, to be honest with you. Not saying that they don't defend the run well. Obviously last week they kind of defended it well against Alvin Kamara, but I think that they're better against the pass, and that, they're better at getting after the quarterback and forcing at least pressure on him. So I am going to give this game to Philadelphia since A.J. Brown is playing. I think that Tampa Bay could potentially win. I think this is a close game between two teams that are 2-1. It is in Tampa. But otherwise, I'm going to give the game to the Eagles. And I'm going to say they're going to score 23. And Tampa Bay is going to score 20. And that's my prediction for this game. Looking at Bengals versus Panthers. Now, I can't see a more doomsday kind of game than this. The Panthers rocking last week, beating the Raiders, who, don't get me wrong, the Raiders, probably not the best team, but the Raiders had won an impressive game the week before against the Ravens. So they were coming off a team that beat what we think should be a playoff team in the Ravens, and they go in and they handle them with none other than Andy Dalton, who looked, a lot better than I think anybody, thought he would look, to be honest with you, putting up 319 yards and 3 TDs with no turnovers. And the Panthers, even with their lack of success, still have Chuba Hubbard having rushed for 192 yards over 3 games, a pretty modest amount. But still, they're not without a lack of run game. And the thing that I'll say against the Bengals is that the Bengals, they did not play the run as well as I would have hoped against, Washington. And, you're talking smack and you're, saying, oh, they're running Washington's running a college football offense and that sort of thing. And it's just like, it bites you in the butt. Don't get me wrong. I don't think Dalton's going to be dropping passes to his wide receivers like Daniels was last week. But overall, I think that, with the way that he played last week, I think that it is an issue of concern, you guys. For the Bengals, the way their defense played. And obviously they played Kansas City tooth and nail, the week before, after having an embarrassing opening week. But this is a team that needs to win. And last I checked, it is still September. And they suck in September. They are favored pretty heavily, I guess, by ESPN Analytics, giving them a 64% chance to win. But to me, unless Cincinnati really looks at it itself, I think that Carolina is a team that, isn't to be trifled with. And it just looks to me like you have so many injuries on the D-line that maybe Chuba Hubbard has, a good game. Even Andy Dalton, you get the run game going and you start to, milk the clock because you want to keep it out of Burrow's hand. Him passing for 300 yards and doing well with these wide receivers and getting it to him. I think that this is a team that looks mildly dangerous, and I say that because they still don't have a lot of talent, on Carolina. I think I am gonna go Cincinnati for the sole reason that they look good offensively, and I think their defense is gonna step it up, because otherwise you look at this game and it's like you're talking about firing, their offensive coach, afterwards, because it's like, oh yeah, starting off 0-4, not a good shot to make the playoffs with 13 games remaining after that. But yeah, I think that Cincinnati wins, and I think they're going to put up a lot of points again. And I think that they're going to win this game 28-21 is my prediction for Cincinnati visiting Carolina. Moving on, we have Jaguars-Texans. Jaguars getting thrashed against the Bills. I don't think that we really need, to talk about that too much. This team looks like they have a lack of identity, a lack of fire, and they're going up against their division opponent that just suffered a really bad loss against the Vikings, which I don't think anybody expected either. Looking at this game, you have Tank Dell out. Unfortunately, the Jacksonville Jaguars are without Evan Ingram, who is a big, tall, security blanket for Trevor Lawrence. And, even one of their good linebackers, Foysoid Aloakun, is doubtful. So if he doesn't play, I mean, you're overall kind of looking at this game and you're thinking the Texans are going to be able to run the ball really well. Even with Joe Mixon being questionable, I think he plays this week. They obviously have Nico Collins on the Texans, who's their main guy, their 6'4" threat that CJ Stroud gets to in clutch situations because he's so hard to guard against. And the other thing too is that this is at the Texans' home stadium where they're undefeated this year. And unlike previous years, the Jaguars are 0-2 on away games. They used to really kindle that magic and do well in stadiums that weren't their own, but not this year. It's their fourth game away. It's a third away game in 4 games and that sort of thing. And I just don't trust the Jaguars as much in this game or this year, because they finally look like a team that these teams are ready to take it to them. And if they can't respond, it is an absolute mauling, And I'm not sure why it is, because this team was supposed to get better. They have a lot of young talent and all that, but we'll really see. We'll really see how Jacksonville responds with a little bit extra rest than Houston. But I still don't really think that helps them that much. Because I don't think Houston really wants to be embarrassed 2 weeks in a row. And so I'm going Houston, and I'm predicting that they score, honestly, 34 in this game. And I think Jacksonville scores 10. I'm going to give them 10. Because I think that the way that they're playing, it just isn't pretty. And I think that these teams know it, and they literally smell blood in the water. Next game we got is Steelers against the Colts. The Steelers undefeated, playing lights out on defense, not giving really anything to these opposing offenses. Obviously against the Chargers, which I thought would come down to QB play, which in all honesty it did. Obviously last week the Steelers dominating the Chargers, winning 20-10, and knocking Herbert out of the game because he went into the game with an injury. Previous week only giving up 6 to Denver. And then week 1 only giving up 10 to Atlanta. The Colts beating Chicago last week, who does have a decent defense, but I still think that, this is kind of the Steelers league with the way that it's been a defensive year for the most part amongst a lot of different teams. that are at the top, their defenses have really been coming in to the clutch, which is why I think the Colts, they really are going to have it tough this game. I really don't think that the Colts are going to have a good time this game. I think it is going to be an opportunity for Anthony Richardson. I think it's going to be an opportunity for Anthony Richardson to show that he can at least not panic under pressure. But I think it's going to be more of a teaching week in the sense that, Anthony Richardson is going to have a very, very hard time getting away from TJ Watt and this pass rush of the Steelers. And I just think that, it's just not going to be pretty. And even though it's at Indianapolis, I just, the Steelers have the type of team that is built for on the road. Strong running backs, strong, even though Warren is out, unfortunately, with this game. But it's like you still have Najee Harris, who is their lead bell cow. And then you have Cordero Patterson, who is also just kind of a hard, fast runner, but also kind of a bruiser-ish runner, who I think, still has great speed and can help in the run game quite a lot. And I just look at this and I think that Justin Fields is going to be able to run around on this defense. It's going to be somewhat similar when people were running on when Malik Willis was running on the Colts defense on the Packers, a few weeks ago. They didn't really have that much of an answer. And I think that Pittsburgh has done a really good job with utilizing Fields to his strengths. And I think that not only are they going to be able to run the ball a lot, but they're going to be able to get after the QB, so they may score more, in all honesty, than people may think. If Richardson cannot protect the football, or if he's tossing it up for these DBs on the Steelers, he's really going to have it rough this game. So I am definitely going Pittsburgh. I expect them to go to 4-0 and the Colts to fall to 1-3. And I think that the Steelers, they really find their offense, unless they really don't want to let it fly that much. I'm going to give them, I think that they score 23 in this game. And I think that the Colts, this might be a game, I'm going to say they score 6 points this game. They don't even get a touchdown because of how mad and crazy Pittsburgh is on defense. And they have great complementary football. Now, moving on, we have Rams against the Bears. As we all know, the Bears losing last week to Indianapolis. A close game where, like most of their other ones, they ended up being really shot in the foot by turnovers. And obviously the Rams, who I thought had very little chance to beat the Niners last week because of how many injuries they have, and obviously they gave up a lot to Jawan Jennings. I'm wondering how much they can keep this up and stop the bleeding until they really get, until Puka can come off of IR, Cooper Kupp can, get healthy again. It just seems like it's an improbable scenario for the Rams. But overall, you have a great quarterback that can get it to these guys, and they don't need to get a ton of space because Stafford's ball placement is, very high level. And then Kyren Williams having a good game. If they can get their run game going, they can, of course, have success against the Bears as well, because the Bears' run defense has been shaky this season. It isn't what it was like last year where you just weren't able to run on them and that sort of thing. And obviously, I think that the Rams think they found someone in Kyren Williams who not only can he run the ball, but he's a good goal line threat. 4 TDs this year. And then it's like Stafford passing damn near close to 70% with 69 completions at one-on-one attempts for 754 yards. Even though he's only got 2 TDs, which is, I think, a result of, lack of go-to weapons, I think that you really look at Stafford and he's putting it all together. Whereas, you look at the Bears, they've really struggled to find who they need. To be that guy, to be that security blanket for Caleb Williams. And I think that their offense just overall has struggled. I think they're really trying to go too deep downfield, I think, is one of their issues. And I think they need to cater to Caleb Williams's strengths a bit more, but until they do that, I really can't side with the Bears. They've made a lot of these defenses, I wouldn't say look elite, but they just really haven't had production or like, oh, the Bears are a scary team offensively. And I think with Stafford obviously at the helm, I don't think the defense is going to be as opportunistic against Stafford, which they've proven against these less experienced quarterbacks, to where they've been able to keep it close in games and potentially give, the offense a shot, but they just haven't delivered as far as I'm concerned on Chicago. With that being said, I think the Rams win this game. And I think it's going to be a close game. Like the Bears have kept most of their games this year within one possession. But I think that the Rams, I think that they score 20. And I think that the Bears, they score 17 in this game. That's my prediction. Moving on to Commanders Cardinals. We obviously have the Cardinals coming off a loss to Detroit, and then we have obviously the Washington really showing how good Jaden Daniels can be, dropping balls into baskets like with Scary Terry, really being able to take on anybody, in the league. And I think that was kind of the beginning to them really starting to let loose and give Daniels the reins to this team. I think that game showed that he can make most, if not any, throws. He can be smart with the football, and he can push it downfield. Now, looking at the Cardinals, obviously we were talking about Kyler Murray having like the highest PFF rating a couple weeks ago. I don't think that is still the case, but they ultimately stuttered too many times against Detroit. You're trying to get the ball to Marvin Harrison. You're throwing a pick because of it. He's questionable this week, unfortunately. But you also look at Washington, and unfortunately Austin Eckler is out, who looked like he was doing really good with them, And obviously they handled Cincinnati. And then the week before that, they handled the Giants, who we obviously, after last night, I think we saw that the Giants, they're not as bad a team as I guess everybody thinks. And I mean, despite the lack of points for them putting up, and despite it being a game where, they were just going for long drives, that's why the Cowboys weren't on the field. But they look like a team that just isn't going to roll over like in previous years. So the Commanders, I think, know they can take control of their division as well. The Cardinals do need a win. It's a 3-way split at 1-2 in the NFC West. And, the Seahawks could potentially run away with the division, which I think is wild this year. But they're favoring the Cardinals heavily in this game, according to ESPN Analytics, which I don't understand. I think the Cardinals I think they have good weapons. I think that Kyler Murray has a good rapport with these weapons, but we'll see how Marvin Harrison really does with the injury. And obviously, them going up against the Lions last week, they really couldn't get anything going in the air, even though Kyler Murray had plenty of time. And I think the Commanders are kind of a young and hungry team that are hyped up about their new QB, and they have good pieces. So I'm taking Washington this week with an upset, and I am going to say that they're going to win 24-14 against Arizona is my prediction for this game. Moving on to Patriots 49ers. Another NFC team at 1-2, and obviously New England kind of getting thrown around by the Jets in their last game, which was Thursday night, and the Niners losing a close game, against their division rival, the Rams, last week. Where it would have, them winning that game meant that they, solidified kind of their second spot in the division, but they didn't do that. This game is at San Fran. And Christian McCaffrey, as we all know, is on IR, and it sounds like he's going to be out for a while and hasn't played this year. And then you look at Deebo Samuel, he's questionable as well. But it's like you look at San Fran and you look at their team, they know that they need to snap out of this skid. They won opening week, and now they are on a 2-game losing streak against Minnesota and then the Rams. And I think that New England is going to snap back on defense this week. But I don't think that their offense is going to be enough to really show that they deserve to win this game, especially in San Fran. I think that San Fran, they're going to realize Shannon's really going to go into his, he's really going to go into his barrel of tricks this game, I think. Because he knows that New England isn't a defense that's just going to keel over to any ordinary, offensive play. I think that Brock Purdy is going to need to show that he can be the leader of this team. And obviously, without McCaffrey, he really is going to need to show that he's the leader of this team. I don't want to sound like a broken record. But yeah, this game, George Kittle is in. He's fully healthy. Brandon Ayuk is. And then you have Deebo Samuel. And, Jawan Jennings, who had an insane game last week, but they still couldn't win. I don't know what it is overall about the defense, but they looked slow near the end of the game, which is why, the Rams beat them last week. But I don't expect this game to be that close. I expect it to kind of be a slow burn kind of game, where the Niners do eventually pull away near the end of the game. And I'm going to call San Fran scoring 20 and New England scoring 10. That is my prediction for this game. Now moving on, we have Browns Raiders. Two teams that, goodness gracious, the Raiders winning their only game against the Ravens in a comeback victory. And then the Browns, only team they've beat is Jacksonville, who looks like a bottom-dwelling team at this point in the year. Same with Cleveland. Same with the Raiders getting their butts handed to them by Andy Dalton, the Red Rocket. And overall, to me, the Raiders don't have the talent to win this game. They don't have Max Crosby. They don't have Devontae Adams. They're obviously, their coach is a young coach as well. Stefanski. He really needs to pull he really needs to pull his coach of the year and finally show why he can be the coach of the year to potentially fix this team and get them flowing. I'm not saying the defense needs fixing, even though, they had, Dallas blow them out week 1. They've held the last 2 teams under, to 18 and 21. But then one of those was the Giants. We just saw the Giants only able to score 15 last night against the Dallas defense that was apparently a huge struggle bus. But Cleveland against the Raiders in Vegas. I think even though Watson knows he's going to get paid, I don't think he wants to go out like this. And if they lose this game, you're probably talking that they're trading Amari Cooper. They're probably going to start retooling their team. Or maybe it would be a surprise, but maybe they finally actually fire Stefanski, because goodness gracious, if you lose this game, I am sorry. Against essentially a bare bones talent perspective of the Raiders, where it's like they're missing their best offensive player. They're missing their best defensive player. It is wild to me. But even the Raiders last week, I mean, they weren't able to get pressure on Andy Dalton, and that was with Crosby. And I just don't know what this game is going to look like. I think that because you have the better, more athletic QB, I think that you look at the Browns and they have the best receiver in this game without Devontae playing, and Amari Cooper. And I just wonder whether Cleveland can run against this Raiders defense that has they have a good run defense. So are you going to be able to rely on Deshaun to win this game? I'm going to take the Browns only because I think that their QB is a little bit more mobile and a little bit, fits what a successful quarterback is this season. And Gardner Minshew, while he does kind of scramble, doesn't really run. And I think that Cleveland's defense could win this game for them as well. I think it's going to be a low-scoring shit fest. And I'm going to take Cleveland with 16. And I think the Raiders, I think they score 7 this game. But otherwise, prepare for the ugliest game of the week. The worst game of the week, potentially, with this. If it ends up being a good game, I'll be like, damn. These kinds of games are impossible to predict. But moving on. We have Chiefs, Chargers. I'm sorry, Chargers. You potentially don't have Herbert, I'm assuming. It's wild to me because usually the Chiefs and the Chargers games end up kind of being like a tight game. But then the Chiefs, through one way or another, they pull away at the end. They play this game where they're entertaining the Chargers. They're entertaining that, yes, this is a team with a talented quarterback and a talented, somewhat talented team and a talented defense. But then they end up pulling away. Now, looking at this game, we don't know whether Herbert's playing. He's questionable with that ankle injury. Do you really want to play him? If it was up to me, I wouldn't play Herbert this game. I just wouldn't play him. And you know why? To me, it's because you risk further injury. You're in a division where you do have 2 wins already, and it doesn't look like you're going to go behind, the Raiders or the Broncos because of this game. And your team is playing well, and why risk injury in a high stakes kind of game? You know, that could be gritty, but it's, you know, your history against the Chiefs is not very good. Harbaugh, as we know, is going to want to run the football a lot. He's going to want to run the football a lot with Dobbins. And ultimately, they couldn't run it against the Steelers last week when J.K. Dobbins was the leading rusher in the league. And I totally get not wanting to play Taylor Heinicke, as he sometimes brings flair, but then sometimes he falls flat. And he doesn't really do that much. I think that if Herbert plays, you've got to be smart. You've got to be dropping these guys on short, schemed passes and that sort of thing. You are also without Rashawn Slater this week. And Joe Alt, you know, got a little banged up and he's questionable. It's crazy to me that... And Joey Bosa's also out. So your best rusher is Khalil Mack, and then, you know, Poona Ford, as far as I'm concerned. Up for discussion with who the second best rusher is without Bosa playing. And you've got a couple of banged up corners that are questionable. And then Asante Samuel Jr., who is even more so on an island because of that. Where it's like, oh, we're just not going to throw it to you guys. Patrick Mahomes is going to take apart these other corners. And I think that Kansas City is kind of due to have one of those victories where they put the hammer down. And they go to 4-0, and it isn't one of these where they're like, holy crap, we could have lost this game. Like, where it's like, oh, it's the Falcons. They could have lost that game. Oh, the Bengals, who are surprising 0-3 and could have lost that game if they didn't commit a penalty, more than likely, of PI. It's crazy to me. And they're still just effectively, you know, doing the same things with different players, not to the same degree that they usually do, but the Chiefs are the Chiefs. And because of that, I'm taking them in this game, visiting the Chargers, who are banged up. And the best part about the Chargers O-line was that, hey, they're not letting up a lot of outside pressure, but Rashawn Slater's injured. Joe Alt's a little banged up. And the Chiefs, they force pressure from the interior with Chris Jones more often than not. I'm blitzing with Leo Chenal. So I'm taking the Chiefs this game. I expect them to rise to 4-0. And they're going to win this game 35-17 is my prediction. Now moving on to Sunday Night Football, we got Buffalo Bills, Baltimore Ravens. The Bills, undefeated. Honestly, in my opinion, the top team in the league to beat right now. Solid run game. Cook is just looking tenacious. And Josh Allen isn't even needing to go into that Superman mode where he has to absolutely carry this team. I feel like the only game we really saw that was their first game against Arizona, where they were trailing really, really big at the beginning of the game. And then they really locked in and they won that. Obviously, being undefeated, they had to have won that. And then Miami, really picking on the younger brother again. Jacksonville, even picking on them harder than they did Miami, which is, you know, crazy. And then you got the Ravens. playing a solid game against the Cowboys up until the end, in my opinion, where it's like goodness gracious, Ravens, I didn't expect it to be like this for them at the beginning of the season, even though the only non-playoff team that they've played obviously was Las Vegas. But I expect this to be kind of a colossal showdown. I think Baltimore knows that if they can go toe-to-toe with Buffalo, people will stop kind of saying like, I don't know if Baltimore is, the same team as last year. And I do think that they match up well to a Bills team that does like a mixture of run and pass. The Bills, Josh Allen really hooking up, these tight ends. Dalton Kincaid is looking more and more like the guy that and the reason why they took him early last year. James Cook, like I said, he's doing amazing. Josh Allen, don't need to really talk much about him. Still has all the talent. And their O-line playing really, really well. And isn't banged up at all. I think it's going to be tough for the Ravens to get pressure. The defense, people have been saying, yes, Taron Johnson's been out, but these guys backing him up have been playing scrappy football. Very well coached, obviously. You look at Von Miller getting a good amount of playing time and causing disruption like he used to. I know they're trying to keep him fresh and healthy so that he can be a depth rush piece type of thing, but I think he's looking close to where, he's not like he's unguardable, but he's a problem. Obviously, Khalil Shakir, Keon Coleman, even Mac Hollins, Curtis Samuel. While they don't have a ton of wide receivers on this team, they're all contributing. And Josh Allen is dishing it around like pizza slices on this team. Looking at the Ravens, you've got tougher guys on the defense like Marlon Humphrey, Kyle Hamilton, and even Marcus Williams, Kyle Van Noy playing like a man on a mission to really still prove that he's going to get after all of these guys. And overall, I think just a really good defense. Hard to defend. Roquan Smith everywhere, running down guys like he's trying to collect bail money. So I think that he's going to be after Cook all game. And I think that Cook, while he's fast, he's twitchy, I don't think he has the speed to really, outrun or escape, the likes of Roquan Smith. Lamar Jackson has been throwing it well. I think that Zay Flowers has been doing well. I do think that they could do better with the passing game, but I like how Isaiah Likely has really emerged as their potential top threat, which is crazy because I think Mark Andrews is a very, very talented tight end still. And overall, the line being pretty healthy. Obviously, Andrew Voorhees unfortunately being doubtful for this game. Tyler Linderbaum a little banged up. But overall, I think that this O-line is one of the better ones in the league for what they're doing on Baltimore. Derrick Henry, incredibly hard to stop. And then it's like you look at Justice Hill, electric Justice Hill to me. So looking at this game, I think the Bills take it. I think Baltimore, it's going to be a hard pill to swallow, losing their first two home games. and going 0-2 at home in their first 4 games. And I think that, Josh Allen's playing a little bit better than Lamar Jackson, the reigning MVP. And Allen just looks like he's a man on a mission to win MVP this year. And until he really slows down or he gets checked or teams look like they know how to prepare for this or he meets a legitimate top tier defense that is going to make it hard on him, I still think he, is going to be able to compete. But I'm going with the Bills. And I think the Bills beat, the Ravens in a crazy Sunday night football matchup. And I think the score of this game is going to be 24-23 in favor of the Bills. Now, with that being said, you guys, I think that, this is a good set of games for this weekend. I think we're finally getting to kind of the nitty gritty where we see what teams are this year. It's still been a very bizarre year to me. But I love the matchups that we have. I think we have a lot of interesting predicaments for certain teams. And even looking ahead, I mean, it's already kind of looking like, these playoff teams are, I wouldn't say decided, but there's certain teams that are just playing well and are winning games in their own unique way. So, looking at this, I think it's going to be a very exciting weekend of football. And if you guys want to see my Monday night predictions, it is another doubleheader. And I think that those games look like they could be really, really good. But if you like this video and made it this far, thank you for watching. And as always, go Pack Go.